In Iraq, at least 14 teenagers have been stoned to death with cinder blocks over the past 3 weeks.
According to a police report, Saif Asamar was found bludgeoned to death last month.
58 deaths have occurred over the last 6 weeks and no arrests have been made.
At least 14 young men have been bludgeoned to death in the last 3 weeks in East Baghdad.
And those dressed in the emo style have recently become the targets of so-called death squads.
Lists have been found in the past few days.
The Iraqi Moral Police released a statement on the Interior Ministry's website calling the emo phenomenon devil-worshipping.
Warn in the strongest terms to every male and female debauchee. If you do not stop this dirty act within 4 days, then the punishment of God will fall on you at the hands of mujahideen.
The withdrawal of American forces has possibly created more difficulties than it has solved.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be looking at the war on emos in Iraq. Today's episode comes with a big content warning for unaliving, violence and homophobia. I also want to warn people that searching for information about this situation is likely to bring up gory images of those who were targeted. I of course won't be showing any bodies, but I just wanted to warn you that those images exist and also that they're everywhere for some reason. I also just wanted to address censoring. I personally don't agree with having to distort words or using alternative phrasing such as unaliving, but I'm doing it because YouTube requires me to. Like they say, don't hate the player, hate the game. And just before we get into this video, if you're not already subscribed, then please do hit the subscribe button. I post new videos weekly.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Homosexuality has existed ever since the beginning of time, and in the previous era before the occupation it existed, and there was some lenience in the laws as to how to deal with it.
On Tuesday night, I gave the order for British forces to take part in military action in Iraq.
Iraq until 2003 never witnessed any such wave of violence. But since the removal of the previous regime and the arrival of the new religious fundamentalist, ruling parties, we started to see people killed by electric drills, torturing people alive in the most gruesome, undescribable way. And now there's a wave of violence against minorities.
Mr. Blair wrote to President Bush with an assurance that he would be with him whatever.
We need to start by looking at the events leading up to the war on emo, beginning with the invasion of Iraq. This will just be a very brief overview of the war, by the way. After the attacks on 9/11, Bush announced a war on terror, which was supposed to be a war on freedom-loathing people, and the US vowed to use all of its resources to avenge 9/11. Bush said, "Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated." Tony Blair, war criminal and then British Prime Minister, said, "I don't think there is any doubt at all that this is a threat aimed at the whole democratic world. The US has been singled out, but these terrorists will regard us all as targets." Military action soon followed in Afghanistan. And then in March 2003, Iraq was invaded. This was sold as being justified due to alleged weapons of mass destruction being held by Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq at the time, and his alleged ties to Al-Qaeda. Both accusations are false, by the way. The occupation of Iraq went on for years, despite the fact that Saddam Hussein was captured by US troops in 2003, mere months after the invasion began. It all started in 2003, but withdrawal wouldn't start until 2007, and it wasn't even complete until 2011. That is 8 years of occupation. An occupation is a light word to describe what happened. It was a war that destroyed the country. Bush promised democracy, but instead delivered destruction. Saddam Hussein was removed from power, and a civil war was the result. Brown University researchers estimated that 4.5 million people passed as a direct result of post-9/11 wars. That is, of course, not just in Iraq, though. I just wanted to point out to everyone that despite all of this, Tony Blair was still given a knighthood. In a completely shocking turn of events, the war on terror didn't end terror, but instead it encouraged it. Go figure. I don't know about you, but if my country was occupied under false pretenses for years, resulting in the destruction of the economy, countless lives lost, the loss of historical sites, and then you went ahead and knighted the person who was paramount in supporting the occupation, then I too might become radicalized. I too might have beef with the occupiers and their way of life, you know what I mean? The instability in the country was a breeding ground for extremism, and it allowed Al-Qaeda to evolve into ISIS. Tensions between the Shia and Sunni communities were heightened, and sectarian political parties reigned supreme. The country was in crisis. Saddam was gone, but 1,000 more Saddams replaced him. We returned to the Dark Ages, one resident admitted. It was very difficult to imagine that the United States would allow religious people to control Iraq.
Part of a global subculture identified by black clothing and punk hairstyles, emo youth in Iraq are often perceived as un-Islamic, homosexual, and even devil worshippers.
For a country used to terrible violence, these killings have been shocking. The rise of emo culture among some young Iraqis hasn't been welcomed in all quarters. Despite the infiltration of Western influence, many in the country remain deeply conservative.
We are trying to deal with the negative aspects that go along with this emo style.
Okay, so the country was invaded, left destroyed, and extremism thrived as a result. What's that got to do with emos? Well, the war on emo in Iraq wasn't really a war on emos, it was a war on homosexuality.
You know what? I really don't like all the talk about emo because this is something the Iraqi government came up with. In the beginning it was LGBT, but then when they found out that the international community has some laws against the persecution of gays, now they turned it into an emo issue because it's a new issue that nobody knows how to deal with.
Whilst homosexuality wasn't accepted under Saddam Hussein's rule, residents have said that homophobia increased massively after the Iraq invasion.
Being gay was hard enough under Saddam Hussein, but at least they could have small private gatherings like this one. This photo, we were told, was taken in the 90s. Now, with militias roaming the streets, showing any sign of being gay is impossible. And when we asked Iraqis, we found widespread intolerance. I consider gays to be criminals and terrorists, this man says. We as an Islamic society consider it to be against the law, this man adds, so they should be punished by law.
This led to the morality police publishing an anti-emo statement on the Iraqi Interior Ministry website in 2012. It called emo satanic and stated that they wanted to eliminate emos entirely. After the statement was published, the New York Times reported that residents in Baghdad started receiving letters telling them to reform their behavior, stop being gay, or face deadly consequences, the letters said.
In February, lists of names began circulating, each branded as a rapper, gay, or what's known as emo. It's not clear who's distributing these leaflets, but they warn youngsters to avoid what are called homosexual haircuts, to stop dressing in clothes of the devil with forbidden graphics like the emos, or else.
After this, the unaliving started.
Families are ashamed, and of course the Iraqi authorities don't protect people and don't really do any investigation. So it's very difficult to come up with clear numbers. But we estimate, based on all those testimonies, that it will be up in the hundreds.
It's hard to know just how many people passed, but some reports put it as high as 100. The Associated Press put the number at 58. However, the BBC reported fewer passings. Whilst the exact number of targets is unknown, we do know that the methods used were horrific. One victim who managed to escape said, "First they throw concrete blocks at the boy's arms, then his legs, then the final blow is to his head. Then if he's not unalived, then they start all over again. International press started picking up on the story, which is when the Iraqi Interior Ministry denied that this was happening. Several international human rights organizations also spoke out about what was happening. But that was it. After the initial wave of unalivings happened, the story stopped being reported on. This is despite the fact that things didn't improve at all. In fact, in 2023, a draft bill was introduced that would make homosexuality punishable by death. I guess Iraq unalives homosexuals is less of an attention-grabbing headline than Iraq unalives emos. And that's it. That's the end of the story. I know it has a very sudden ending, but the press really did stop caring after the initial violence, although we know it continued, and in fact, continues to this day. Thank you for watching.
وجنود الولايات المتحدة والمدنيين فإننا نقترب كثيرا من هذه النهاية. شكرا جزيلا.